Hello and welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast, designed to help business owners and leaders with short atomic episodes to impact your business for marketing, sales, business growth, personal growth, and much, much more. I'm your host, Jason Osborne, and I'm looking forward for your business and life to be positively impacted by this podcast. And as a thank you, just for listening, I'd like to give you free access to my LinkedIn mini course to help you get on the right track with LinkedIn to generate high quality leads without being spammy. All you need to do is go to www.impactforleads.com to get immediate access. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, it's Jason Osborne here again, and welcome back to the Atomic Impact Podcast, rather. I am here with Justin Donne. I'm really excited to have him on the show today. Justin is a business strategist, coach, consultant, author of several books on business and influence, a speaker trainer who's worked with Disney, Universal, Prince's Trust, local and national government, and many other small businesses. He's been featured in magazines and on podcasts, TV, radio shows, including Director, Heartrepreneurs, NBC, BBC, and the Peace Summit. So he's been active all around. And Justin's a proprietary proven, Justin's proprietary proven process saves clients 10, 15, and even 20 years in the learning curve, which we can all do for sure. So Justin, welcome to the show today. Really a massive pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool, man. Well, listen, we were chatting a bit pre-show around a couple different concepts. And one of the things that I'd love for you to dive a little bit more into, because we're here about, those atomic impact moments. What can those things that we can take away and learn from? And one of the things you mentioned was strategy, but also being able to find a lot of strategy and resource outside of your current sector or industry, where a lot of people can be very insular around that. And I'd love for you to share some concepts and ideas around that and what people can kind of take away and implement straight away from your learnings over the years of that.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things that I've noticed as probably one of the top 3 problems in businesses, which is common to the different cultures, the different countries, the different languages that I've worked out and in, because I speak 6 languages. I've worked in half a dozen countries and companies of all sizes, from tiny micro startup to global corporation. They really have only a few things in common. We have tremendous differences, but a few things in common. And one of them is this confusion between strategic design and operational tactics. And whether it comes from an inability or an unwillingness to put yourself out there and design a winning strategy, or perhaps not a winning strategy, it doesn't matter, because that seems to be something that I see almost, not always, but almost always at all times in all places. But you know what? That's okay, because there's this idea that if you need help, you reach out for help. That's true in mental health. If you need help, you reach out for help. A lot of people don't and end up committing suicide. And in the business world, it's the same thing. You can commit suicide, career suicide, by not reaching out for help. Some people are afraid to do it. But here's the thing. That's why consultants exist. That's why coaches exist, really, is to provide that help, that outside influence, that viewpoint that you may not be aware of because you're stuck in. There's an expression in England or in the UK, I'm stuck in. Well, that could be a good thing, means you're focused and working on something, but it could also be not such a good thing, because it could mean that you're stuck in one viewpoint, in a silo, over obsessed and over specialized in one thing. Now, we've all heard the term best practice, right? So here's the thing. When it comes to best practice, that's a misnomer, because most of us think that it means from inside our sector. What's the best practice in law or in the coaching industry or inside the nonprofit industry or this sector or that sector. Well, what that really means is what's the most common practice. But the actual best practice might be off your radar screen. It might be coming from outside your sector. It might be a relationship that you're completely unaware of. For example, like something borrowed from the theme park industry and transferred into the charity industry, the charity sector. What's the relationship between the two? Well, on the surface, it might seem like, well, how could that work? We don't have the same budgets. We don't have the same, morale. We don't have the same outlook. We just don't do business the same way. One is for profit, the other's not for profit. But here's the thing. If you can adopt the thing and then adapt it to suit your needs and then adapt it to suit your sector, but then improve it, because if it comes from the past, for example, it needs to be improved so that it becomes contemporaneous, so that it becomes true in present time and workable in present time. And so that's really, really important to do. And so those three things, those three principles of adopting something, adapting something, and then improving upon it makes something, or can transform something into a best practice, but only really if it comes from outside your industry, outside your sector. And that's something that really only a consultant can do, especially somebody who's not a specialized consultant, who's only specialized in, I am an HR consultant. Now, I'm not criticizing those people, because sometimes what your business needs is, of course, someone to handle your books or handle your record keeping or handle your job descriptions. That's fine. But sometimes what you need, and especially when it comes to strategic design, is somebody who has seen dozens and dozens and dozens of sectors and industries and sizes of businesses, and ones that have good cash flow and are healthy, and ones that are struggling and nearing the end, that's seen all parts of the business life cycle. And so if you can do that, that makes all the difference. And that's been my observation over the years. And I could talk about 100 examples of those where I've seen it specifically, but rather than get specific, I'm now trying to be a little bit more general to really drive that point home, that there's a huge difference between what is a common practice and what is an actual best practice. And that difference is, well, it's a common practice if it's practiced within your sector, within your industry. If it's a best practice, it means it's cutting across many different industries and sectors.
I absolutely love that, Justin. I think that whole concept is something that everyone can really take away and apply. And I think as well is to not just assume going, oh yeah, it's best practice, to question those things as well and go, well, could there be better practice? And because I know a lot of industries get very siloed, they get really insular. This is the way we do it in our industry. But I love that example that you gave earlier. What could a theme park or like what does Disney do in so let's say we're talking about like customer engagement or customer retention, and you're in a particular industry and you're looking at other people in the industry and how they do that. Being able to step outside of that and think, well, what do the entertainment industry, what does Disney do to retain and engage their customers? And there might be a principle or concept they use that you can apply that can be quite disruptive in a good way on how you do that. So do you have other examples around that, Justin, where people that think, oh well, this is the way we do it, but when they actually start looking how other industries do it, it completely kind of blows the lid off what they do and has helped them propel forward in their business?
Yeah, totally. And in fact, you kind of intuitively hit the nail on one real example from my work is borrowing something from Disney in the employee engagement scenario and transferring that over to the Princess Trust. That's the which is a charity, a nonprofit. And why did we need to do that? Because, well, the Princess Trust was interested in winning a certification called Investors in People. And So they needed ideas. They needed to figure out basically what to do to not only engage, but other things with their employees. So I adopted a bunch of strategies from Disney. But of course, you can imagine that the budgets from Disney, well, Disneyland specifically, but Disney generally, are going to be a lot higher than a nonprofit in the UK, a small nonprofit, because the one has 1,200 employees, the other has 350,000 employees across the world. So they're going to be very different. So they have to be then adapted. And also they have to be improved because, some of these things are from the past and they need to be improved so that they apply to the present and future situations. And so by doing that, that's what we did. And guess what? We won the award. We won the certification. And so it was a wonderful thing. But there were several strategies, several, let's say, methods, not strategies really, but techniques. The strategy really was designing that whole thing overall. And part of the design was we're going to borrow from this other industry. The actual techniques, the actual strategies is what we borrow, is the actual stuff, the day-to-day things that we did, that we swiped, let's say, to borrow from the marketing world, that we swiped from them, and then of course adapted, because we're not talking about business espionage or corporate stealing of intellectual. We're not talking about that, because that crosses a line that's inappropriate.
Yeah,
What
for
we're
sure.
talking about really is best practice, but real best practice, and somebody like me using the radar and saying, I wonder what that's, and it does take some thought, and it does take someone like me to do it, is now that would work after sweeping across the different sectors, the different industries, the different business sizes, and saying, now that would work. But if we, of course, modified it and adapted it. And so I was able to say that, then zero in on that and say, okay, great. Let's take out what are the core principles behind this recognition and engagement scheme. And here are the core principles. And by doing that, then we can adapt it to the present situation and circumstances. And so it might sound a little highbrow and sort of intellectual for people, but the real, I guess, core principles, takeaways, and immediately doable actions for people could be this. They could be that, number one, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There's no shame in that. Certainly no shame in that. It can save lives. It can save careers. Reach out for help for whatever your reason and motivation is, whether that's because you want somebody like me to be your best kept secret, your secret weapon, or the whipping boy. In other words, if it fails, you can just point the finger and say, we should have never hired that consultant. But the point is that whatever the motivation is, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for that help. Now, that's not an excuse for taking advantage of people and thinking you're going to get free consulting and a ton of freebies, because nobody should be afraid to reach out for my help. But what they're going to get is, tips that take me 5 minutes to spit out. If they want real hand holding, then of course they need to invest. But the thing is that number one takeaway is, don't be afraid to reach out for help. It is there, it is available. If not me, then other people. Number two takeaway is, even if you don't do that, you can not only subscribe to your industry journals, associations, and organizations like that, institutes, whatever, depends on the country you're in. You can, because of course you need to keep abreast of the current scene and the current laws and the current practices within your industry, but also start to take a look outside. Start to network with leaders and people and managers from outside of your comfort zone or outside of your silo. Start to look a little bit outside and see whether or not there are things you can start to bring in. Sometimes it's called lateral thinking. Sometimes it's called horizontal learning in the education sector. Whatever you call it, just start to do that, because it's a skill. Of course, it's also a talent that some people have and some people don't. That's okay. If you don't have it, then you will need the help and you'll need to hire someone. But if you can develop it, then it's a little bit of a skill because you can start doing that. So those are the two really actionable steps I would suggest people do right away, immediately. Number one, reach out for help. Number two, start to look. Just start to look outside of your sector.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And the thing about that I love this, and the reason why we do the Atomic Impact podcast is we sometimes we say, oh, I know this, I know to do that, but are we actually doing it? So, if you're looking to grow your business, if you're looking to improve in a particular area, don't get your blinders or blinkers on, whatever country you're in, whatever you call them. Don't put those on and think, well, this is how we do it in our industry. Start looking out, like what Justin said. And don't let your mind go, oh, well, we can't do it because they do it differently, we can't do it our way. Do exactly what Justin said. And just make sure I got this right, Justin, because it's adopt, adapt, and then implement. Is that correct?
Improve.
Improve. Okay, so improve it based on once you start adopting it, then start improving it once you're doing it, which is amazing. I love that so much. Uh, I'll call it simple wisdom. That's not down to downplay what you've said, but it's such a doable thing. It's not complicated as long as we just do it. So that's fantastic, Justin. Well, listen, I know that what you do is amazing, and we've spoken before, and I love what you do. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you to learn more about you, or to be able to contact you, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah. So right now, the number one best place for people to touch base, connect with me, um, get free tips if that's what they want, or explore a relationship if that is going to be meaningful for both of us, is like the way you did, LinkedIn. I use that right now as the best way. I have never needed to maintain a website, so I unfortunately don't have one to give you. But I do have a Facebook page, The Justin Donne, and I do have a LinkedIn profile. But LinkedIn is the absolute best place for me right now. That might change in the
Awesome.
future. I don't know. But for now, it really is a great app that I find convenient. I also find that it helps me keep safe from all of those GDPR worries, because I don't need to keep a massive database. It's
Yeah.
just my social network connections. So, and I'm pretty safe. And, if you ever think, this guy's an idiot, you just disconnect. That's it. You just remove the connection. It could not be easier. So for now, I really suggest that people just look me up on LinkedIn under my name. I don't hide anything or prevent people from connecting with me. Although if people spam me, I do snip that rose bush and remove the connection right away. I
Yeah.
don't report people, but I just disconnect if there's spamming going on. And I, of course, never spam anyone ever. That is, I hate being spammed, so I
Yeah.
don't do spamming. But yeah, so if you just find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, and then you can message me all you want, ask me questions. And you know what? If don't worry about if you are taking advantage, because if you start to cross the line and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this person is trying to milk me like some kind of consulting cow, I'll let you know politely. I'll say, look, I mean, I'd love to answer all of your questions, and here's the investment required. And when
Absolutely.
it comes to that, I work with people. I have so many different patterns of the way I like to work with my clients that I like to make it work for them. Whether they're a startup and just one man band, or whether they are a global corporation, I have structures of pricing that work with people and that work with everyone. And so nobody should
Brilliant.
ever be afraid or think they can't afford me, because the only person who can't afford me, honestly, is the scam artist, because
Yeah.
I just don't work with them. And so there you go. But if anybody is legitimate, if anybody is reasonable and ethical, then they can afford me. And I
Amazing.
love working with people, and I also do free mentoring. However, I'm extremely selective and only do one free mentoring at a time, because I want to make sure that they are successful. And so right now I'm in the process of mentoring someone. And so I don't have any space for that. I even have a waiting list for that. So, and that's closed. So I do my share of donation of my time and volunteering. But again, if it's a simple tip that I can give someone, and it's a simple question, I'm always, always happy to just answer that.
That's
So
awesome.
that would be it. Find me on LinkedIn, Justin Dunne,
Good.
JustinDonne, and I'd love to connect.
Yeah, we'll make sure and put the your link in the show notes as well. And I always say to people, just as a tip as well, if you're connecting with Justin or anyone, don't just send a connection request to him, because he's not going to know where you're coming from, why you're wanting to connect with him or anything. Take those 5 seconds and just say, "Hey, Justin, I heard you on the show with Jason. I'd love to connect." And it will, that one little step goes a long way in communication and relationships. So listen, Justin, thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the pearls of wisdom that you shared on the show today. And we'll chat to you later.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jason. Thank you very much. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you do connect with me and you're interested, just ask for a free copy of my little booklet. It's a short toilet read in one session on the can or the John or whatever you want to call it. And it does go into a little bit of the way I do business, the strategic design stuff. So it may be enough for a lot of people. It's absolutely free. I'm not going to say it's like Harry Potter or the best book in the world, but so far everyone who's read it liked it. It's a peek into my world. So sorry, I forgot to mention that just ask for it. I'll send it to
Cool.
you as a PDF at no charge.
Amazing. That's fantastic, Justin. Thanks so much.
Thank
Wonderful.
you, Jason.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Atomic Impact Podcast. And as a reminder, please go to www.impactforleads.com to get free access to my LinkedIn mini course to help you get on the right track with LinkedIn to generate high quality leads without being spammy. And please also like and share this episode with others and leave a comment, as I'd love to hear from you. This is Jason Osborne, and I look forward to sharing the next episode of the Atomic Impact Podcast with you.